Well, this place hasn't changed a whole lot. It's Carter Finley Stadium. It's Raleigh, North Carolina. It's the Florida State football team. And this is what happens here. Florida State comes into Carter Finley leading 17-3 at halftime, give up 16 unanswered points in the second half, and fall to NC State 19-17 in a game where there's a lot of frustration for that football team right now because they felt like they gave NC State that game, and really they did.
Yeah, I agree with them. I think they gave them the game. Look, man, I think they're very evenly matched teams. I think if Devin Leary stays in the second half, you probably lose that game a little more comfortably. But he didn't. And when you have Jordan Travis and they have a grad transfer from Charleston Southern who did not complete a pass in his time on the field, and you still lose the game, you feel like you let it slip away. When you have a punter decide on his own, that was not called clearly, to run over the line of scrimmage to punt. We didn't even know that was a thing you did. I didn't know that would be in the rule book. That, if you run over the line of scrimmage to punt, well, then that you lose. It's a loss of down, and the team gets the ball right there. I didn't know. I mean, I thought maybe you'd get ejected if something like that happens. Like, that's crazy that that's ever happened before. It would even be somebody would even think to put that in the rule book. But we saw that tonight, and yeah, man, the frustration of even with everything that went wrong, everything went wrong. You lost Robert Cooper for most of the game. You lost Trayshawn Ward. You already didn't have Fabian Lovett. Every other play you had a guy getting hurt and getting banged up and then coming back in. You had all these things against you in this place. You get that stupid, crazy personal foul call on there's the one on Dylan Gibbons, which he earned. Josh Farmer's just ridiculous. And they got points from that, Ira. They don't get points from that drive if they don't. It was a preposterous call. But you felt like you had stolen, almost you were in position to steal a win, in my opinion. And then you, on 2nd down and 9 from the 23-yard line or so, you throw it up to a DB and he intercepts it and you lose the game.
Yeah, and again, you talked about the self-inflicted wounds, and you said Florida State could have stolen the win. I guess, man, but I thought overall Florida State, maybe I'm wrong, I feel like Florida State was the better football team. For long stretches, the defense played really well. The defense was put in some really tough situations. On one of those, the play where Alex Mastromano, and it, just to clarify, and you can watch Mike Norvell's press conference, it was not a fake punt. It was never supposed to be even an option of a fake punt. He felt pressure, rolled out, and just kind of lost track of where he was, and then realized, hey, I don't want to run with this.
Don't you think he was like, man, I can run for a first down?
I think at first.
And in his brain, we didn't get to talk to Mastromano. We didn't get to talk to many of them. They weren't in a talkative mood, which you can understand. But I think at first he's like, I could run for a first down here. And then in his brain, he's like, oh, wait, isn't it 4th and 20 or whatever it was? He's like, I don't think I can make it. And by the time he realized that, it was too late.
But it was just a series of plays like that, and it's hard to get. I mean, that's a mistake, obviously, but it's a mistake out of effort. The Dylan Gibbons penalty to me was kind of a backbreaker, and Mike Norvell, he doesn't criticize players very often. He was mad about that penalty because instead of being 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, now it's 3rd and 16 or 3rd and 17, backed up in your own side of the field, and that was a point of the game where, you still had the lead at that point. You needed to get some first downs and maybe try to score again, and instead you end up having to punt. And, again, the penalty on Josh Farmer was a ridiculous call. But there were other mistakes. They had late in the game, there was the personal foul on NC State for late on Jordan Travis after the interception. But, Micah Pittman gets a penalty too. And I don't know if that was a legitimate call or not. But it was just like you kept making mistakes. You kept making mental mistakes. A lot of it was from effort, but you're not good enough as a football team, certainly on the road, to beat teams when you have as many mistakes as they have.
Yeah, and that goes back. It also, there are the mental mistakes and the penalties and everything else. There's also drop passes. Malik McClain has a touchdown that I think hit off his helmet. Johnny Wilson drops. I think by far it was his most crucial drop since he's gotten here. He doesn't have many to choose from. That's a bad drop when your team needed it. It was 17-10. Your defense, and we'll get to that in a second, had given up a touchdown to start the second half, and then on 3rd and 7, I thought Travis threw maybe his best ball of the day, and you drop it. It would have been a first down. Maybe then that keeps the momentum of your offense going because you had scored your last 2 drives. Maybe that keeps your offense going, and you feel good about yourself. Instead, after that, it was an avalanche. It was just disappointing because, again, look, we can go back and forth on who deserved it or who didn't deserve it. Their defense took over in the second half. Florida State was confused. They were rattled. Jordan didn't play well, but nobody else did either. Norvell took all the blame after the game, said it was all on him. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that.
I do think some of the changes NC State made defensively were part of the reason why Florida State struggled so much offensively in the second half. Because the second half, the offense did just absolutely nothing. And then had some big mistakes as well, but they just couldn't move the ball. And even on that last interception, it was the same play Micah scored on earlier, but NC State changed its coverage. So they made adjustments, and I think he's mad at himself, it seemed like, because they didn't adjust to those adjustments.
Yeah, and look, man, it is a fine line between winning and losing when you're a pretty good football team. It's a fine line. Like, look, if Jordan Travis waits, I don't know, man, a millisecond longer and sees what's happening to Micah Pittman on that coverage, and instead he throws it to the inside, it's a walk-in touchdown. And I do want to say this because we have to get to it. We have to address it. Neither one of us have any issue with throwing the ball in that spot. None. Zero. I would have been if he would have just centered the ball for that kid in this moment and then he misses. This whole post-game wrap that we do would have been me screaming at the camera, "What are you thinking? What are you thinking?" So I have no problem at all with the way he coached and called. Well, the way he coached the last 2 minutes of that game, because he was asked about it afterwards. He didn't answer it at all, completely skirted the question because you can't answer it. The answer is, I don't trust my kicker, so there's no way I can coach like Dave Doran can coach. If Dave Doran gets past the 30, hey, babe, just settle. We got a field goal in the bag.
Knocking out 50 yards.
Yeah, just knocking out 53 yards like it's nothing. Like Mike Norvell doesn't have that luxury. So even though he's got a 23-yard line, first down, clock running, that's not an automatic, man. Not a 30-yarder is not an automatic. So I get taking a shot. I get throwing in that position. I love the aggression in that spot. A touchdown, not a field goal. But, man, you got 14. You threw it up to my guy twice on just fade throws. I think he caught both of them for big gains. And if they don't give you that look, then I get it. But it's always a look. I don't even know what that means by saying they don't give you a look. He's always going to be 6'7". In their red zone offense, although that technically was out of the red zone, again, that was an issue there. And it just, Norvell didn't say that it was a hold on the kid, the NC State defensive back. It's probably a hold. That's not getting called in that spot. He was also well coached. Like he kind of ran the route for Pittman. He knew he was coming where he was going. So yeah, and I guess that's a read that Pittman has on the play, that if the DB is outside, has outside leverage, he can cut it in. And he didn't read it right, or the kid stepped in front of him and caught him and held him a little bit. But it just so happened that's right when Jordan Travis was making the read and the throw, and you lost the game. But the defense was fine. Look, they're down. They lost Robert Cooper in the first quarter, I think, and he didn't come back. Fabian Lovett didn't play. Jared Jackson got hurt. They're down their three best defensive tackles, essentially. So there's a reason. There's a pretty good reason NC State could run, and that kid ran hard. Their running backs ran hard up the middle. I just hate for the second week in a row when your defense just comes out right after halftime and doesn't even force a third down, Ira. That's what I don't quite understand. They played well the rest of the night, and they played really well against Wake in the second half, but they don't even force a third down. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I almost thought the whole celebration, it was great for Fitzgerald to hit the field goal right before halftime. He hits a 47-yarder. It was an awesome scene. The entire team ran out. First, Mascherano grabs him and is throwing him up and down like they just won the lottery. Then the whole team runs out on the field. It was a cool moment, but you just wondered, how do they come back from that and come out focused in the second half? We talked to Tatum Bethune after the game. We only talked to Tatum Bethune and Lawrence Toafili, but Tatum said he didn't think that was the issue. They did talk in the second half about how they need to come out with focus, or they talked at halftime. But it just didn't happen. They didn't play with it. You knew NC State was going to run harder, block harder, play harder coming out of the second half. That first drive was huge, and Florida State just didn't really respond. And then after that, it was death by 1,000 pinpricks. It was just field goal, mistakes, and they end up taking the lead and getting the win. I think when you look at this team right now, I don't know that. Look, they're 4-2. And this is what we talked about. At this point in the season, if you asked us before the year, would they be 4-2 right now? Would you be okay with that? I think you'd probably kind of be okay with it. It's not bad. It's not great. It's not as great as it could be, but it's 2 straight losses. And now you got number 5 Clemson coming into town this week when you've got all these injuries that have been racking up. it's you wonder how many times this team can keep rising up through those injuries.
Well, and look, I think my biggest concern, it's getting louder, isn't it? I hope we're picking him up on the mic. I think he's about to run us over. My biggest concern is what I've seen from the offense the last 2 weeks. Like, I get it. NC State's got a good defense. Wake doesn't have a great defense, and you didn't do very well against them. So now in the last 2 games, you've scored a total of 38 points. That's what you were averaging going into those games, was 38 a game. And now you've got, I don't know, the best defense in the country coming in. So that's really concerning. I thought, it's not like they have a ton of injuries on offense. You know what I mean? The offensive line. I mean, obviously they lost some depth on the offensive line, but Robert Scott was back. Trayshawn Ward, that was a big loss, and we don't know his prognosis, obviously. But all the receivers were there. You had all your skill guys for the most part, and you scored 2 touchdowns. What's it going to look like next week, man? That's what's concerning to me, because that was my concern going into the season, was can this offense take the next step? And I really thought it had. And then you see it spiral into madness 2 weeks in a row. First in the first half against Wake, and now in the second half against NC State. Clearly different atmospheres, but still in different reasons. Like, look, man, Johnny Wilson's got to make a catch. If he makes that catch, who knows how that drive goes. Dylan Gibbons turned a 3rd and 1 into a 3rd, and we can't make it. We got a punt. A 3rd and 16. That's just not a smart penalty from a very smart person. You can't have that. And then, Jordan made a bad throw on an interception, and then they had the last drive, which obviously clearly something went wrong. But that's what concerns me, is like, to beat Clemson. And it's also the stretch of the schedule, right, Ira? Like, these just happen to be the 2 best defenses you're going to face, and they're back-to-back, coming off your first loss. So now you're staring 4-3 in the face. You're staring a 3-game losing streak in the face, and you're like, where's all the progress we made? It's all disappeared. It's gone. And I'm not saying that. I don't think that's true at all. But I get it. There's a chance you could go basically a whole month of October without a victory. That kills a lot of goodwill that you built up, right? We got to see some strides next week, man. Win or lose, and they're going to be an underdog, not by much, but they will be an underdog. You want to see some strides offensively, and this team play with confidence, because you worry about a team that's wounded, that's used to losing, saying, here we go again. Now we're going to have a 3-game losing streak. Now the season's off the rails. I don't think the season's off the rails. That's a tough loss to a good team. It's a tough loss to a good team.
The one thing I would say about that, though, is in the first half of that game, they were up 17-3 at halftime, and they could have been up way more than that. They missed.
Clear the runway.
They missed several runs. They could have been big runs. Yeah. They dropped passes. So from that standpoint, man, if you
also went for it on 4th and 3 from the 23, the exact same scenario they might have had late in the game. They went for it on 4th down because they feel like they have to.
But that's a good defense you were going up against. And I think it could have been, man, they could have blown NC State out in the first half. They could have been up by 3 scores, and instead they didn't cash in on those opportunities. So I think the potential is still there for the offense, but guys have to make plays. The receivers have to make those catches. The running backs have to make those plays, and then Jordan just can't have those mistakes. That's very uncharacteristic for him. He does not turn the ball over. To have two interceptions in the fourth quarter is just not very much like him. It might speak to the pressure he felt maybe in this environment, but also against that defense.
One more complaint, and then we got to go. We got to wrap it up. But I didn't like – I thought Norvell's called a really good season for the most part on offense. I didn't like – I know you can't just get 5 wide and against that team and just air it out the whole time, but then part of me is like, why not? Because the runs, the gives to Toafili were not – they just weren't – it wasn't happening, man. They hit 2 runs in the first half. Benson had 1 and Trayshawn had 1, the one he got hurt on, the 40-yarder he got hurt on. Other than that, other than in Jordan's running, they weren't doing anything with just the simple gives to the running backs. It just wasn't there. And I thought they went to the 5 wides. They did it in that last drive, and they got down the field. Part of it was a targeting penalty. But when you go 5 wide, I just thought, man, you can't run the ball. And you have to know as a coach, okay, we are really struggling against the run. Against their run defense, let me spread it out and see if my receivers and quarterback can go make plays. And if my receivers are covered somehow, maybe he can scramble for 7 or 8 yards. I didn't like the amount of runs that were called into nothing. And I don't know if those are checks by Jordan, bad checks. I can't blame it all on Norvell. But there were too many runs that turned, 1st and 10 into 2nd and 12, and you're behind the chains.
All right, that's a good complaint to end on. I'm out of complaints. Yeah. For Corey Clark, and this is Irish Schoffel.
I wanted to say this one last thing. So was this more painful? I don't think this is as painful as Ty Jones knocking Christian Ponder the ball out of his hands.
The greatest hits?
Yes, and it's certainly not as bad as 2012. Similar scenario, 17-0 at halftime, or 16-0 at halftime that game. This was 17-3. But that team had national championship aspirations, and it was a horrible loss. This team doesn't have that. It's still a bad loss. It's still an awful second half, but not quite on that level, right? Here he comes.
Signing off from Carter Finley. We have plenty of coverage coming to warchant.com if you want to read it. We'll talk to you next time.